There's something quite enchanting about tree houses. I have memories of climbing trees as a kid, and I know I'm not the only one. There's something about being up in the canopy, up with the birds, being able to see everything without them seeing me. Many of us want to have tree houses as part of our businesses, but almost as many have problems trying to understand the concept of its design and how to think through the experience that guests will have. That's why I invited an experienced treehouse builder to give us some ideas about the design of tree houses and what we need to think through when making our plans. Welcome to the Glamping Americas podcast, the place for inspiration about the business of upscale camping, glamping, and luxury outdoor guest accommodations. I'm Sarah Riley from the Glamping Academy, and I'm working with my friends at the Glamping Show Americas to share everything you need to know about new trends, events, business models, and investment potential in the rapidly growing world of luxury camping that delivers an experience. Interest in this industry is exploding, so if you want to be the first to find out what's hot and what's not, subscribe here and check out the show notes for more exciting news and links. And be sure to add the next Glamping Show Americas to your calendar for the 30th of September to the 1st of October 2025 near Denver, Colorado. I can't wait. I have so many memories of climbing trees as a kid. There's something about being up in that canopy that just used to magnetize me and fire up my imagination. I remember being able to look down on nature as I sat on the branch, and I felt I was invisible. No one else could see me. I used to play games, building campfires, chucking a potato in that campfire and looking forward to it cooked with butter. Whilst I sat up in the tree looking down, I used to make myself a very bad homemade bow and arrow out of an old stick and some twine. And I used to sit up in the tree and pretend that I had to catch something to be able to cook it for my tea, ignoring the fact that I was going to have a jacket potato. Inevitably, I did not manage to shoot anything, so don't worry, no animals were hurt in my games. I remember clearly the disappointment that I felt when I had to climb out of that tree to eat. Even though I was starving, it meant I had to come out of my hiding place, back down to the ground and back to reality. While I was in a special place on my tree, I could watch the barn owls and blackbirds. I could spend my whole time hiding from my entire family. They'd never find me. I felt safe, I felt secluded, and I felt people would just leave me alone. It would be a lovely place for me to just go into my imagination, explore my wildest dreams, and just feel the magic of nature. When I look back at those years, I realised that actually climbing trees and being up in the canopy was such a source of inspiration for me and what I do now. And every opportunity, I'm back out there again. But this time, when I'm staying in trees, it's in a cabin, in a tree house, up in the canopy that's safe and relaxing. And most of all, there's a comfortable bed and a gorgeous sofa to sink into. So in the glamping sector, tree houses are a little bit on the pricier end of structures you might want to include on your site. However, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the more expensive end of the glamping market is enjoying higher booking rates, better occupancy, and an increased nightly rate. In fact, a well-designed treehouse can bring you in as much money, if not more, than a number of units, which require you to deal with more customers on a daily basis and much more cleaning. But people have been known to get their designs wrong, leading to a permissions nightmare, health and safety issues, financial instability, and bad press, not to mention a bad experience for guests. So I invited Dustin Feeder from O2 Treehouse to give me his take on a successful treehouse design. Dustin, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot believe that it was back in 2018, probably before that, but 2018 that the book was released, which was The Anatomy of Treehouses, which I was project managing at the time, and you were a contributor of at the time. How has the time gone so quickly? What have you been up to?
Oh my gosh, wow, you bring it back to 2018. It's been crazy actually for O2 Treehouse. 2018 is when we kicked off our Pinecone Treehouse actually. So that was a fantastic year. And we started renting that structure out, which was, has been a huge thing for O2 Treehouse. We've had so many influencers stay at that structure. But then unfortunately in 2019, our entire studio burnt down in a studio fire, which was, yeah, that was tough. And then, so we did a GoFundMe campaign, raise funds, and then, we're kind of we call it the Purgatory Studio because it's just like almost like a homeless studio, right? We're just trying to collect things and salvage things, and then, we arrived at a new proper studio by 2020, and then COVID started. I was like, oh, great. This is wonderful. So, we were bubbling our crews and that kind of thing and random different places, right? So that was tough for construction industry, I think, to continue forth in that period. We had client projects we had to continue to prefabricate and that kind of thing. But then we did a Start Engine campaign, an online crowdfunded equity campaign, which was fantastic. We launched really tree walkers at that point through that online equity campaign, and the amount of interest that I got that year, and so that was really by 2021. We had launched. It was slightly prior, but then we were really like raising during 2021, and just incredible. I mean, really inspiring. I was on the phone all day, back to back calls with folks that were interested in the Tree Walkers franchise that we were launching. And, for those that don't know, Tree Walkers is a treehouse hospitality brand with basically like this modular treehouse, variety of different sizes. It's got like a big, almost like teepee tent on top of a truss system. And the truss system is, I call it treehouse Legos because you can kind of meander this truss system through the trees. It's suspended or stilted. For those who don't live on the West Coast that have giant redwoods, you can stilt it. And we signed up like 40 folks with letters of intent that were interested in starting a tree walkers camp, and many of those were international. So yeah, it was really inspiring to just see how much interest there was in the space. And of course, COVID actually helped that because so many were entering into that space or kind of pivoting and like, oh, maybe realizing a dream that they had to start a land project of some kind. So that timing actually worked out quite well. And, we raised a bunch of capital and put that to work doing the engineering and the franchise legal, all the various different buckets, right, to launch a new business. I got to work like creating the prototypes and that kind of thing, 2021 and 2022. And, they say, things happen in threes, right? Or big blows happen in threes. So our third one was that our building was sold, our new studio space, the building was sold. And so we lost our lease, which is just a year by year lease. And unfortunately, yeah, so we had to kind of, after just like reestablishing our metal shop or wood shop, our offices, we had to move again. So we moved from Oakland, California to Sonoma County, to a small town in Sonoma County. But it was also a really positive thing in the end because, we ended up finding a space where we had this capacity to expand. So we started with 5,000 square feet, and then we expanded year two into 10,000 square feet. And, that's kind of been just in lockstep with the business expanding. Our expansion of our installation or prefabrication capacity, our installation team capacity, in preparation really to service the tree walker camps, where we'd be, doing more tree houses within a calendar year. And so at this point, we are in a joint venture with Tree Walkers for a camp that's in Georgia, about an hour west of Atlanta. And yeah, so we're all very excited. We're going through, trials and tribulations of doing a larger project that you typically go through with permissions and water usage, with the county, is it county or is it state, so we're kind of in these kinds of throws. But yeah, we're poised and ready to really, prefabricate about 12 structures to start out there. And then there's going to be kind of an event-based food service, some other amenities, that'll make the experience very interesting. And it's 1,000 acres, right? So, and this was part of kind of the logic and strategic partnership with a joint venture partner, is that, okay, you had 1,000 acres, like there's some old growth deciduous forest on the land, there's already an organic farm and this kind of thing happening there. an existing barn. So it's like I'll end up talking more about like the soil health and the forest ecology portion of what Tree Walker stands for. But like these kinds of things and these ideas were really like already there inherent in this property. So yeah, I'm very excited about that project right now. And yeah, O2 Treehouse has just continued to do our bread and butter of creating, these very custom and sometimes very challenging engineering wise and geometry wise structures that are actually tree houses, suspended and supported by tree houses or by trees.
So before we talk about the type of design and everything that you put in there to how it looks, why tree houses? What is it that's actually attracted you into tree houses and to start all of this and the ball rolling back when you started?
Yeah, good question. At first, it was a very kind of innocent, artistic exploration, really. Back in 2006, at the end of my college years, I was really focused on sustainability and what is the balance that humans need to strike with nature? Like, how do we achieve that? So much greenwashing was taking place, so many also good things and sustainability wise were taking place and new materials and that kind of thing. I was coming out of a furniture design program actually that was really like very tight with the sculptural program there. And so I was exploring these ideas kind of philosophically through and like, searching through form and meaning through the materials in that. And serendipitously, my father had just moved into a new house back in Wisconsin where I grew up and just had like some giant, gorgeous trees. And he was like, hey, remember when we built, when I built you kids a tree house when you're growing up? And he had, that was rather high in the tree, in fact. And so we were looking up at this giant poplar tree. It was like, oh, wow, how cool it would be to, build something there. And so this kind of idea just got like implanted in my head. And it was a very inspiring concept. And it was kind of at this nexus. It was basically the sculptural commentary on how do we fit in nature? Like, are we part of it? Are we separate from it? And so, building just a new take on the treehouse. I was very much interested in Buckminster Fuller, so I had like geodesics in on the brain, and it just kind of clicked. It wasn't arduous. It was just like, oh yeah, like, oh, a new light structure, suspended in the trees. Oh, geodesic, like that's a perfect form engineering wise to do that. And so, yeah, pursued basically, on a shoestring budget to create this prototype. And that's where things kicked off. And, I very much enjoyed it because it was really a continuation of my exploration from college with these types of ideas. And I think the timing was right where people also had these kind of ideas on, were floating around the internet. And it was just a new thing. It was a new cool thing. It was like, oh wow, it's like a Japanese lantern up in the trees. And of course, like if you're just out of college and you get in a magazine, it's like, whoa, like, oh man, I'm kicking butt. Like I'm gonna continue
I've made
pursuing this.
it.
I made it. Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's like bragging rights. And and so I did, and I worked for a design house, product design, a couple other places, and then freelance stuff. Of course, like just bootstrapping and putting it together until I got a project. I did some trade shows and I set up a structure in the trade shows, and that was super fun. It went on the West Coast, and from that, I ended up getting a project in. Well, it was San Diego, and then I went back to California. I had one in Beverly Hills. And I was like, whoa, it's like I'm in my 20s. I'm like, I'm in Beverly Hills building tree houses. This is awesome. This is so much fun. I was having a blast doing it, right? It was, and just working with, originally like, guys from school and, then eventually kind of meeting folks out in Los Angeles and just getting referral after referral. And just, at that point, I was just having a lovely time building the portfolio, exploring Los Angeles, doing international site visits every once in a while. And then, yeah, 2010 ended up working with this bamboo company as well called Bamboo DNA. And I absolutely love bamboo and just everything that goes into that craft of creating with bamboo. And we were out in Portugal building, I mean, for 3 months there, some giant bamboo tensegrity shade structures. That's where I ended up meeting my wife. out there
Wow.
in 2010. And she was from Brazil, and she was volunteering with that same, festival and the crew. It was great.
So when it comes to you designing a treehouse structure, because most of your designs are very unique, what are your non-negotiable elements when you're coming up with your ideas?
Ensuring that the trees can support it is pretty non-negotiable. If we're just
Mm,
going to start safety first there.
yeah.
That's important, which can be tough sometimes because, between having such a business that's just so reliant on these bespoke kind of unicorn type projects, and then so your client needs to align not only with like funds to buy something like this, but then also you're asking for the trees that are capable of supporting it. And sometimes there's just not that many trees on the property, so we'll end up stilting and that kind of thing to get around that. Non-negotiables, hey, I have this design already completed. Can you guys build it? It's usually a no there because, I'm in this to explore these artistic ideas, and that's happened in the past. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really that interested in doing that. So I've said no to a number of opportunities where it's like, hey, we already have this done. And also, and this is, I guess, more from an insurance perspective, is that can you guys prefabricate it and we have our guys install it? Because just insured to like do basically the full design build cycle. Other non-negotiables, I don't like to do. I get a lot of folks asking for things that are kind of end up being thematic, and so from a design perspective, just in what I want to pursue artistically, doing thematic things aren't of interest. Where it's like kind of too on the nose, too like Disneyland and that kind of thing.
So when you are instructed by an owner of a piece of land, do you do a survey of the land, or do they often say, we want to have it here, and then you have to design something around that space? Or do you come up with your own idea and say, this would be perfect for over there? How does that work?
That's a little bit of both for sure. There's the master planning perspective of just practical concerns. Where is there existing power, existing, water and sewer? So then that kind of like defines the envelope of like what's capable budget wise as far as the acreage. Rarely do I have a case where it's kind of rigid, where it's like, oh, it has to be here. Clients typically not coming with a lot of background knowledge to be able to have such a strong conviction and, really determine that up front. So they're really like, hey, I'm very flexible. Like, where is this going to be most successful with the master plan considerations, but also like then ebbing and flowing with what's possible with the actual trees. That's why I believe in glamping so much. I think it's a wonderful thing that will hopefully lead to a tipping point in relation to so many ideas. That's like the tip of the iceberg, right? I can just see it where there are larger companies that are connected to bigger hospitality in the States starting to explore, oh geez, like, oh, we better look at this. Like, we better look at this outdoor experiences market that is really growing so aggressively here. And we're over here like thrilled, right?
And the interesting thing was, back then we were having to explain to people what glamping was, what being outside in luxury was, and why it was a trend, why it was a thing. And now people, particularly hotels, are suddenly realizing, and they're waking up to it and saying, oh my goodness, we better look at this trend. The market cap is increasing really significantly. How can we tag this onto our existing offering? But
Right.
actually, a lot of what's so magical about glamping is a lot of it is unique and it's special and it's different. And it means that people have this very unique experience. It's very experiential. So it's not just, a line of tents and people are just in one of those tents, like it would
Right.
be a line of hotel rooms. It's not the same. So a lot of the personality of the landowner, of the builder and designer is in the offering. And that offering then becomes something that attracts many more people to explore doing something very different in a very interesting way that brings people from inside outside and helps them connect more with nature. That's personally what I love about it. And of
Mhm.
course, then if we have people connecting with nature, they're going to be much more motivated to protect nature and to get involved in nature, and their kids will get involved in nature and all of those things. And I think Treehouse is one of those many structures that allows people to get even more impacted by nature and what's around them while they're staying outside. Now, it really is magical being up in the canopy, especially if you're in a structure that's very unique. And it's one of the things that I've noticed from my time being in glamping and, both as a customer, but also as a business, is that the only limit to what you can do is your imagination. That's the only limit. And that's what I love. And I'd see that in your structures. You put your full imagination into the things that you create. And I've noticed it's blown quite a few people's socks off when they've seen what you've done. Obviously, you're thinking very carefully about the kinds of materials, the shape and the structure and how it moves and how it sits in amongst the canopy and almost becomes part of the tree canopy. How does it work in terms of how you're thinking about the materials you're using?
Yeah, materials are super important. I mean, those are absolutely kind of foundational practical concerns, that we need to consider. Just, it's always like this, how much sun exposure versus how much moisture and rain is it going to get? I remember Pete Nelson saying to me that it's just the amount of structures that you end up having to go back to because like, oh, this roof edge is shedding without a gutter and it's hitting the deck boards down below, and then there's like happens to be a beam there, and like that's just getting watered during the winter over a 10-year period or something like that. And just like any structure really that's built out of wood predominantly as well, you need to be even more cautious with it. And it's this little dance and balance with what people are willing to pay for a tree house, because you can always build into the material set longevity. That's easy, but what's harder is to strike that balance with the budget and manage expectations of the clients according to that. And we kind of pride ourselves in saying, kind of reverse engineering a budget figure and then saying, okay, you know, we checked all these boxes. You need X amount of square footage. You need a bathroom. You need a kitchenette, that kind of thing. Say that's a limited budget. All right, then we have to work with a more simplistic material set. We need to work with the more straightforward processes involved in it. Maybe it's still a cool form, but we're integrating repetition in a certain way. We have to go with this over that. And then it's like the home building is already so nuanced, right? So it's like but then if you're building a small structure in a very difficult, possibly logistical place, and then also up in a living thing, it does add just these layers of complexity and nuance to the built space. But that is like kind of the sweet spot of the design process, right? We are just like any design, you're taking that brief, you're kind of simultaneously navigating and just surfing and just evaluating together all at once, or then focus deep diving, pull in, pull out. You're just testing different thoughts and that kind of thing. It's that glorious kind of process that designers do and to navigate all these things, and then hopefully searching for that driving vision that really takes beautifully blends all these factors, including the practical and the budget, into it.
So where do you get your inspiration for your new treehouse designs then?
Well, it's been interesting over the years where, I've just gone on so many site visits and done so many design rounds and ideas that come just with a single client. I find these days, to a certain extent, I have such this like library of like prior ideas and concepts in my head, which is great because I have this kind of abundance to just like pull from. And then, so when I'm meeting and understanding a new context, sometimes these things just come very quickly, where there's already like this, inspiration to pull from, where I'm like, oh, like I really am driven to pursue this particular concept or form. So in some cases, I'm looking for the right fit, and then like adapting that idea and reacting to then that design brief. and then the constraints of the actual site. In my process, I pursue design when I'm on site there. In my mind, I'm going to have the strike of lighting aha moment, like right here. And it's like, and it's all going to like come together in this symphony of engineering and materials and space and size and height. And I love that. And then I usually on a site visit, walk the land and like, okay, I'm going to evaluate the site. And then, I ask for like an hour or more and then just sit there. It's one of those things where it's like, you can't be driven with any sort of like urgency or need because maybe you don't come up with it. I usually just check in internally and then let it. Sometimes I just zone out. I don't even think about the treehouse. But like if you try and grab it too hard, it like slips away, right? And so it's fun. It's like a meandering of like dropping into the thought and dropping back out. And it's like, because you're also checking in, like, where am I? Like, where every time you come to that space, like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to fill the next year of my life with as we pursue this project? And and so, yeah, I think it's that. I think it's, of course, I think there's a driving theme that I'm trying to pursue with my work, as many are, that I'm just trying to understand the incredible magnificence, brilliance of how nature achieves these things, like in such a elegant way, and drawing from that geometry. But nature is based around these like probabilities of like how energy flows and manifests itself. But it so it ends up being more like smushy and like fuzzy lines and that kind of thing, which creates this soft, playful beauty where geometry and hard lines, the austerity of modern design can be isolating and cold. So I like that kind of nexus, and I am more on the modern side versus the handmade and the handcraft. But kind of, I feel like ride a little bit of that blend in the structure.
I found that really interesting when you were talking about your process for understanding the design for the space, the place, the land, the trees. And you were talking there almost as if it's a very intuitive process for you. So you actually sit quietly and you let almost the message of what it is to come to you so that you're not even thinking about it all the time. It just drops in there like a message. And there is a name for that actually, that it's in, if you're a bit more spiritual in the spiritual world, many people say that land has its own magical spirit. So it has its own power, which has been generated over many, many, many millions, trillions of years, that
Mm-hmm.
land has been there. And it's called the magical Loci, Loci. And it's part of connecting with the land and sitting and being there almost in a zoned out meditative state allows you to actually read and understand and receive messages from the land about almost what it wants. So it was really interesting that you actually use that process intuitively. And many people, many designers are talking about in Europe and the UK, they're talking about it's more important to do that because you're actually reading the land, you're understanding the land. It's almost speaking to you on a unconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really interesting to me that you're doing that. And that's how you get some of your ideas. And especially as tree houses are so enchanting. And they are all about escape. They're about adventure. They're about the things that we used to do when we were kids, climbing the trees, being up high in the canopy where no one can really see that that's where you are. So you can observe nature and you can see what's going on without being seen. So it's almost like you're invisible to what's going on, which is the thing that I love the most because I used to be a tree climber when I was a kid. And
Yeah, yeah.
and that seems to be, for me, a lot of what comes out in your designs. But if someone is thinking about doing a tree house, you realize that, and you do many stilted structures, so you know that you don't actually have to be in the tree for it to be a tree house. From the book that we worked on together, it very clearly, many of those structures were not in trees. They are around trees, they're up high in the canopy or up at tree level, but they're not necessarily fixed to a tree. That's the old version of a tree house. Things have changed now. But if someone was thinking of designing their own treehouse on their own land, whether that's for a business or for their own family, or just to have this structure. How would you suggest they went about that? How, other than sitting in the land and connecting with the Loki of the land, the intelligence of the land, the spirit of the land, what would you say is a really good place for them to start in that design process, the thinking process for their own project?
Yeah, nice. I guess I can speak to that, both for somebody doing it for their own private personal reasons and for a business. This thought actually just came to me after your wonderful explanation there. So it is kind of coming up with what is the reason that you're building it. And if you're building it purely because it's a trend and it's popular and you want to stack dollar bills, which I don't want to diminish, like that's important, but I think you'll find more success if you kind of define for you like why a treehouse and like explore that, like why am I building a treehouse? Why do people like treehouses? Because I think you'll probably end up arriving at the meaning for you personally, some reasons that are going to guide you into some wonderful experiential or aesthetic related things, ideas and that's going to be your Loki in a way. That's going to be your exploration where it's going to drop in for you something from your past or something that somebody mentioned to you that maybe you weren't even thinking about, and then you're going to all of a sudden look at your space in a different way, and you're going to say, oh, I had this preconceived idea prior that was just kind of tunnel vision. And as we do, we just end up focusing on these things and we're kind of mission driven. And you might miss something. And then after it's created, it's just like, oh, wow. Imagine if we wouldn't have thought of that. Like this would have been so different. It would have been, it just wouldn't have had this, whatever that, the soul of the design, it wouldn't have had this thing. And we may not have been as successful either just in your family space and the joy that brings, or the joy for that matter that just brings others because you're opening it up to the world as a rental. And it's like any structure, we have structures all over the place obviously that are 2 or 3 story dwellings, and you're looking into the tree and it's like, so what? It's like, is that a tree house? I don't know. I don't think so. It's probably not a treehouse. It just happens to be a building that is multiple stories up. And so what's the difference? It's like, oh, yeah, I've looked into a canopy of a tree before, like big deal. But then one is something, a treehouse that for structural reasons is stilted next to a tree. And I don't know. I mean, I think when you see it kind of thing.
And it's the feeling that you get when you're in it as well. The feeling is very different from being in an enclosed space, which is a building with a few views of trees, than actually being in something which is both indoors and outdoors, and you're part of the same natural environment that the trees are in and the same canopy environment. You can reach out and touch the trees, you can see the birds and hear the song, and you're not insulated from that when you're staying there. You're still part of that whole experience when you're staying
Right.
there, unlike a building which totally closes off, and then you may as well be in an underground tunnel or something because you
Right.
can't hear nature or experience nature. At least that is for me how it is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And yeah, that's perfect. And it's definitely all those things. And so, but for somebody pursuing it, it's like, yeah, just let your playful side out. Allow yourself to dream big. And because you can always dial it back, but you can't, it's hard to go in reverse where you're thinking small and you're thinking completely restrained by all the practical reasons. And then, because you'll never reach towards the thing and you won't have the opportunity to like distill it down into the design. So that's really important.
It's better to dream big and then be told no and have to dial it back in than to not dream big in the first place, in my
Yeah,
opinion, anyway.
exactly.
So, do you think it's really important for people to consider the local weather conditions when they're doing this kind of thing? Or do you think that the types of engineering that you can now do with a tree house allows you to do pretty much anything anywhere.
No, absolutely. You need to think about the weather conditions, the wind speed for that area if it's a coastal region. I remember touring a camp in Costa Rica and speaking with this camp owner. She was like upper 70s, and it's very cool to speak with her, because she had just developed this over a lifetime and had thousands of acres. But she was like, "Oh yeah, I don't build anything out of wood anymore," and it was almost kind of sad. But she had just seen everything get built and decay so many times over that she was basically like stainless steel, aluminum, and concrete was her building set. So yeah, all things will decay, right? Eventually. So really understanding, I guess, from a business perspective, like what you need out of it, like how many years you need out of it, and how much you're willing to put into it up front, and then just design accordingly. Then choose your materials, but just go into it with eyes wide open. If you're using wood and you're building this incredibly sculpted wood structure, then either know that you're going to be servicing it just like you would any sort of deck, every year in some way, washing it every year, re-oiling it, super important. And you can go, or just like how Bomber, you actually, it's like you go to Disneyland and they plasticize every wood piece. It doesn't even almost look like wood anymore. So there's ways, right? So understanding just moisture content is so huge. Like how much moisture and like how often does the structure get to dry out? Like the use of rain screens, the use of flashing, eaves, of course, the finishes on the wood.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying there about the lady who's gone from wood to metal, that it will eventually decay just the same as the wood will decay. And sometimes actually the wood, yes, it may not have the quite the same length of time where it's strong because it may rot over time, but it looks better, I think, for a longer period of time. So I think it
Mm-hmm.
looks nicer, especially in the context of what we're talking about in this kind of
Right.
nature, natural environment, and glamping. And that brings me to a question. What, from your conversations with people when you're out and about and you're talking about treehouse designs, particularly in the US, what do you feel is the thinking behind the word glamping, especially when talking about treehouse structures?
I use the term glamping for tree houses often to manage clients' expectations as far as the heating and cooling capacity of a space. So it might be a hard shell structure perhaps, but it doesn't have an R value. And so I say this is going to be more like a glamping structure because I feel like that's referencing basically a tent to some degree.
Yeah, that's interesting. So obviously it's a benefit from where you're coming from. When you are speaking with some of these hosts and they're designing their tree houses, are they very much focused on the guest and occupancy and things like that? Or are they tapping into their childhood memories of adventure and escape?
Oh, geez. I mean, it's all of those things across the scale, right? It just depends upon who you're talking to. For justified reasons, it's the bigger the project, the more it is concerned around occupancy and nightly rate. And so I was speaking with a gal just did a site visit for something that can grow into greater numbers, but we're just speaking about three tree houses up front and she's very much more interested in the experience and the look over the architecture and that kind of thing. But as you scale, the risk increases and it's just like, oh, it's got to be X amount of square feet for under this price, and that's just the absolute fixed price on it. So it's just like less, the constraints are higher as you get more into the developer based approach in building world. I guess at the end of the day, it just comes down to the balance between how much is somebody interested in the business from a lifestyle perspective versus how much are they interested in how much like the money that they can get out of it, right? And ironically, I think that you'll get more out of it if there is concern around experiential and the wonderful qualities and spirit that you can include in the design.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. And I certainly think that some of the people that have got the most out of their designs from what they've built to then sharing it with the world, they've focused very much on that element of it rather than the potential turnover and return on investment side of things. It is important. We're running businesses, we're not running a hobby,
Right.
but that it's still important to include that element, I think. And also the guests really enjoy it so much more if there's these special elements involved. It definitely is the kind of thing that will attract media attention if it's unique and special. And it will attract people talking about it as well. So lots of word of mouth recommendations. So there's definitely a lot of PR potential for the unique structures and the structures that are designed around the land rather than the need to make a profit. But there has to be a happy balance, as you say. So, what is your next project?
Yeah, so well the efforts for the Tree Walkers camp are just continuous. So we have a number of structures already out there that are in the process of getting built. And then we're continuously building more of the tents here. We are paused right now a bit because of those permitting concerns, but the intent is just to continue forth there. And so that's very exciting for us here. We're also designing a larger pine cone treehouse that's going to be 300 square feet and include bathroom, shower, kitchenette, all the modern conveniences of a glamping treehouse. So that's going to be amazing. That's going to be it's that much bigger, and the frequency of the windows is higher. I'm very excited. We're building an equilibrium home, which is kind of a structurally insulated panel system or prefabricated wall panel system that connects into our truss. And that has a big panoramic door system. So, including the panoramic door systems that people are just loving, right? And including in modern structures, like, but up in a tree where like that connection with nature is right there at right in front of your door. Then we're just embarking on a new project, which is going to be basically a temple, a treehouse temple intended for plant medicine journeys, and that's going to be in some giant redwoods. And every once in a while, you get these clients who are just like, the world is your oyster. Like, whatever you can dream up, go forth. Like, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be the magna opus. That's exciting. I've been focusing on structures that we built in the past that are more related to glamping, like canvas wall structures and geodesics and things like that. And that was actually like a bit from the glamping show because like we focus so much on tree walkers and engineering this and stilts and suspension. It's like very complicated. And but then that's basically exclusive to the tree walkers brand. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? Like we need some just like open market glamping products. And we've built a lot of those things in the past. It's like, oh, we're focusing on those prior projects and just kind of packaging and recoding them as products. And so we're doing that. Oh my gosh, there's a lot happening right now, but we're going to be launching another online equity campaign soon. So that's going to be fun. We're installing our Rivendell structure in Florida, it looks like, as a rental partnership out there. We're in talks with Warner Brothers right now to get rights to the Lord of the Rings so that we can be kind of the official like Elvin Treehouse Builders, studio. Hilarious. And as I mentioned prior, like, I'm like I kind of shy away from doing like thematic projects. And so we ended up building a very Lord of the Rings inspired structure for a client as a custom project. And then we ran that project as a spec build. So my sales guy ended up reaching out to Warner Brothers and kind of knocking on their door. And they're very interested, in fact. And Amazon's doing the Ring of Power series right now, so it's kind of like has this reemergence. And I just love what the elven culture in Lord of the Rings represents, right? It's like this very beautiful thing, like so much like importance on the arts. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. I would love to be the official Lord of the Rings, Elven Treehouse builders, official. It's, and for us, we're thinking like after we got yeses from Warner Brothers, like why why is there not a an Elven Treehouse Village experience out there, right? It's like Disney and these other brands just go absolutely nuts with it, Star Wars and all of this. And it's like, oh my goodness, that's easy.
Well, just watch this space. I can see that's going to happen now that you've said it out loud.
Yeah, no, it's gonna happen. It's like, how can it not happen? It's treehouses and in connection with nature, all this stuff is happening now, and Warner Brothers has seen what we can build, and they're like, oh yeah, like absolutely, we're excited about this. Let's figure this out and do a license. So that's kind of moving forward. I mean, we're in the throes of a license kind of thing, but so I'm looking for investors for Lord of the Rings Treehouse Camp. Anybody out there is, yeah,
Can I just add though, if someone is thinking of doing that themselves without going to Warner Brothers for the permission, don't do it because they will come after you. That is for
oh,
sure,
yeah,
because that has happened in multiple places where people have actually started using the names or the designs of places without going for permission, and then they have been slapped with a trademark warning, all this kind of thing. So yeah, don't do it. But if you have land and you have money and you fancy it, there you go. Speak to Dustin.
yeah, totally. It is very true, and I've seen that happen. And if you knock on their door, you'll probably get a yes. Because if it's enhancing their brand and you ask for a license, then
Yeah,
they'll probably be interested. And then if you can use all of it and be the official, then it might actually be a better play in the end.
yeah, yeah. I think it's all the if you just go ahead and do it without talking to anybody, that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah, when it's like a corporate, unlimited corporate lawyer budget, yeah, and
Yeah,
probably.
absolutely. You've got no chance. If they find you, it was actually the case that I'm talking about was in the UK, and they
Oh
found them
yeah.
in the UK, yes, and they came down on them like a ton of bricks. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Dustin, if they want to talk about tree houses, design of tree houses, and anything else in between, how would they do that?
Nice. Yeah, thanks. So you can go to letter O, number two, treehouse.com and get in touch with us there. We have a form and a number on the website, and we'll get back to you right away and set up a discovery call with you just to learn about your project. And then we typically try and share some photos of the land right away and kind of plant the design seed, but then schedule a site visit. And then I'm on the road all the time these days and balancing that with two kids here at home. So, but yeah, we'll do what we do.
There's a juggling act, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in that moment of life for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been lovely speaking with you today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of your new creations as you go forward. And don't hesitate to let us know. And I'd really like to see the pictures because I just think they're
Thanks.
fascinating. I just love the whole house concept, and I particularly like your designs. They're really quite staggeringly beautiful.
Oh,
So
thank
you're very welcome. So thank you for joining me. It's really lovely to chat, and hopefully I'll see you at the show.
Yeah, we're planning on it. It was really wonderful for us. So, yeah, awesome to speak with you, Sarah. It's like been wonderful to know you over the
Yeah.
years.
And after
And
so many
yeah,
years, we suddenly met each other in person at the show last
I
year,
know.
last
I
at the
know. It's
last
so
show.
cool.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah,
amazing.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
but thanks for having me on the show.
Oh,
It's
you're
great.
very
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
It's lovely to
Yeah.
see you.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care.
Oh,
Bye.
sooner. All right. Yep. Bye.